If we think about the origins of warfare and military gear, many would focus on ancient weapons. Yet, tools like spears or bows, which date back to the Stone Age, served equally well for both hunting and combat. Meanwhile, many primitive African and Australian tribes lacked specialized military weapons but did have purely military gear. Shields. It's hard to determine when shields first appeared. Unfortunately, objects made from wood, hide, and other organic materials rarely survive more than a few thousand years under exceptional conditions. Most don't last that long. However, cave paintings suggest that shields might have existed over 5,000 years ago, placing their origin in the prehistoric or pre-civilization era. By the way, the term prehistoric refers to the time before the invention of writing. The main hallmarks of civilization are the development of cities and written language. There are various theories about how shields originated. Most likely, the earliest shields were simply poles held in the center, with the hand protected by a piece of rough hide. Or maybe the invention itself started as just that piece of hide. Either way, by the time the first civilizations emerged, shields had already taken on the shapes we associate with them today. For the longest time, I thought a good shield was made entirely of metal. But in reality, such shields were rare exceptions, mostly appearing in the late Middle Ages. Likely, the idea of powerful, all-metal shields migrated into movies and video games from these late examples, which were often crafted as decorative pieces for noble households. For thousands of years, right up to the late Middle Ages, wood was the primary material for shields. The boards were typically no thicker than 10 to 12 millimeters. Most popular shield types didn't even have a metal covering. However, it's essential to understand that a shield's strength wasn't just the strength of a 10-millimeter wooden board. A shield was an integrated system where wood, leather coverings, and a central metal boss reinforced each other. At the same time, many shields were practically consumables. For instance, Vikings were allowed to take up to 3 shields into duels. Before discussing why shields weren't made entirely of metal, it's worth noting their grip types: handheld and forearm-held shields. During the Middle Ages, infantry favored handheld shields. This type of grip placed the hand in the shield's center, protected by a steel dome called a boss. Such shields allowed quick reactions to incoming strikes and offered decent mobility. However, the hand absorbed significant impact force when blocking blows. In contrast, forearm-held shields offered less mobility but distributed the force of a strike across the entire forearm. It's also worth mentioning that shields didn't provide absolute protection. Thrown javelins, axe blows, or sword strikes could pierce a shield. However, piercing it and injuring the wielder were two different things. Moreover, while a javelin lodged in a shield could make it unwieldy and lead to its loss, an axe or sword stuck in a shield might disarm the attacker. So why weren't shields typically made of solid metal? The answer is simple. How thick would the metal need to be to withstand strikes? Likely 4 to 5 millimeters. Now imagine a steel plate, say 80 by 80 centimeters and 5 millimeters thick. Its weight would be about 25 kilograms. That relatively small shield would weigh as much as a full suit of knightly armor. Imagine trying to be mobile while carrying what's essentially a 25-kilogram weight strapped to your arm. And that's without even considering the cost of metal. While exact figures are hard to pin down, based on prices from the 14th and 15th centuries, when metallurgy was fairly advanced, a simple 25-kilogram tool like axes would cost between 14 shillings and £1, roughly equivalent to 350 grams of silver. Now let's get to the point. How much did shields weigh? The variety of shields throughout history is vast. I'll focus on a few of the most iconic types from antiquity and the Middle Ages. Let's start with the shields of Greek hoplites, known as aspis or hoplon. These shields were also used by the Spartans. Essentially, this was a round, forearm-held shield with a diameter of 80 to 100 centimeters. Most round shields, even in later periods, had similar dimensions. This is because for someone about 170 to 180 centimeters tall, such a shield offered protection from chin level to mid-thigh or almost to the knees, covering the entire torso. It's worth noting that in ancient Greece, there were typically more than 3 slaves per free citizen. This was already a civilization with access to advanced resources, including mines. Some mines employed tens of thousands of slaves, with shafts reaching depths of over 100 meters. A strong economy allowed warriors to have substantial protection for the time, including quality shields. That said, it's hard to generalize all Greek shields into one design or size. In the early days, shields were made from wood with metal edging. Starting from the 5th century BCE, they were crafted from thin wooden boards, just 5 millimeters thick, covered with leather on the inside and bronze sheeting on the outside. The bronze layer was usually half a millimeter thick, though some sources suggest it could reach up to 1.5 millimeters. The manufacturing process was complex because these shields had a curved, bow-like shape. The Pavis shield weighed around 6 kilograms, and some examples exceeded 10, which was considerable for its size. It was a crucial part of the Greek phalanx, where each soldier not only protected themselves, but also their neighbor. Losing a shield rendered a soldier ineffective in the formation. However, the shield made retreating difficult, so fleeing often meant abandoning it. Of course, the Pavis, like any shield, wasn't indestructible, and depictions of pierced shields are common. Another well-known ancient shield was the Roman scutum. This rectangular shield was about 70 to 80 centimeters wide and 120 to 130 centimeters tall. Despite being larger than the Greek shield, most scutums weighed between 8 and 10 kilograms. However, because the organic materials of surviving examples have dried out, they often weigh 5 to 7 kilograms today. This relative lightness came from the absence of metal cladding. The scutum was constructed from multiple glued wooden layers, with the grain directions alternating for added strength. The wooden core was covered with coarse fabric or felt, and then leather. A metal boss reinforced the shield for extra durability. The thickness of Roman shields rarely exceeded 12 millimeters. Moving to the Middle Ages, one of the most iconic shields was the Viking round shield, used across much of Europe, including in Rus. Compared to ancient shields, medieval round shields were simpler, even somewhat primitive. It was a flat infantry shield with a grip held by the fist. The hand was protected by a metal boss about 15 centimeters in diameter, made of steel 2 to 5 millimeters thick. The shield's diameter varied greatly, but most ranged between 70 and 90 centimeters. They were crafted from planks about 10 to 12 millimeters thick, which tapered slightly toward the edges. Often the shield's rim was reinforced not with metal, but with leather. The outer surface was also typically covered with glued leather. Interestingly, the Middle Ages saw the use of surprisingly effective adhesive solutions, though that's a topic for another time. These shields were easy to make given the abundance of wood and leather. The metal boss could even be reused. On average, a Viking shield weighed 4 to 5 kilograms. By the 11th and 12th centuries, cavalry became dominant, and traditional infantry formations became less effective. For mounted troops, larger shields with forearm grips were better suited for protecting more of the body. The triangular, or teardrop shape, with its narrower lower section, made it easier to protect oneself without the shield getting caught on the horse's neck. These shields were also made from wood covered in leather, but their shapes, sizes, and construction methods varied widely. Most cavalry shields weighed under 10 kilograms. In the late Middle Ages, heavy infantry armed with two-handed weapons became dominant on battlefields alongside cavalry. Meanwhile, in urban areas, the rapier emerged as a weapon of self-defense. From the round shield, only the metal boss remained, now larger, with a diameter of 30 to 40 centimeters and weighing less than 2 kilograms. These small shields, called bucklers, offered little protection against arrows due to their size, but were effective in one-on-one combat. Their lightness made it easy to deflect strikes, and they could even be used as a secondary defense on the battlefield. Slightly earlier in the 12th and 13th centuries, a massive shield known as the Pavis appeared. According to researcher Anatoly Kirpichnikov, this shield may have come to Western Europe from Rus. It was a large body-length wooden shield, about 70 centimeters wide and up to 1.5 meters tall. The thickness was roughly 25 millimeters, and the weight ranged from 7.5 to over 10 kilograms. Some sources suggest certain pavises could weigh up to 20 kilograms. These shields were often used as stationary defenses. For example, crossbowmen could set them up on stands and fire from behind them. The logical evolution of such shields in 16th century Rus was the gulyai-gorod, essentially a mobile fortress made of interconnected large shields. These walls could be quickly assembled in the field to form kilometer-long fortifications, protecting against mounted archers and cavalry charges. If shields could talk, they'd have epic stories to tell. Most of them, though, would agree they were made of wood and leather and weighed under 10 kilograms. Bulletproof shields? That's a plot twist for another chapter.